So when I was younger, I was actually a very creative person, and I thought I would be a filmmaker or a game designer. So as a kid, I made over 50 movies all the way through high school. I made hundreds of different games, and that was my passion. Life is crazy. So originally, I went to college and studied electrical computer engineering. My father, who's a really smart guy, told me when I was young, computers are going to change everything, son. Study them. Absolutely. And, he was a rocket scientist at MIT, a professor. He was a smart guy. He saw the future coming. He told me I went and studied it, but it wasn't my passion either. I was pretty good at it. But when I graduated, I decided I was going to make movies. And I jumped over in graduate school to USC Film School and studied film and television. And that was really the beginning of kind of taking control of my life and doing what I wanted to. I've had more careers than cats have lives. So I've tried a lot of crazy stuff. And I didn't jump into entrepreneurship right away. The first thing I did was try to get a job in the film industry. And going to film school is one thing, but actually working in the industry is really hard. But I made that my mission, like from the day I graduated. And I sent out 150 letters to all the top producers and production companies in Hollywood. And I got 3 responses out of 150, but one of them was from Disney. And so I went and interviewed with the head of production for Disney, and the head of production looks at me and we're talking, we're having a great conversation. I think I've nailed the job until the head of production asks me a trick question. And that trick question was, what films do you like? Now, I had just graduated film school, so I started rattling off all these amazing films that were very artistic and, changed history. And she turned to me and she said, what about Disney films? And I said, well, they're okay. I used to watch them as a kid. Instantly, my job was over. I didn't get the job. So that was done. The second was, I got a call from the producer of Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. And I thought, amazing! But the first thing he said was, I don't have a job for you. I liked your letter and I just want to talk. So we talked. And that was that. The third time, I actually got a job at a film production company, and it was right across the street from the Mann Chinese Theater. It was called Freeze Entertainment. I got invited in there, and I knew this was the make or break. I landed a job as a reader, which is the lowest rung on the pole. You are just reading scripts. It's a really painful job because your job is basically to read all the bad scripts, and maybe out of 100 bad scripts, you might find one that's good enough for the producer to read, and that's your job. But I worked like crazy. I was persistent, and within 3 months, I got promoted to a TV development executive position. And that was incredible. And I was I learned the business, the entire business, but I wasn't making movies. I was really a business person, taking scripts from agents, giving them off to producers, coming up with who should play what role and what film, who should we attach to the project. So I met at the company one of the producers. His cousin was the founder of Sega. So he said, look, if you want, you could go over to, I could introduce you to my cousin who runs this. Sega had just surpassed Nintendo at the time to become the biggest video game company. So I was like, I'll do it. I love games. You have no idea. I created 100 games as a kid. And I saw this as my chance to be creative. So I jumped over there, met him, went to Japan, started designing games for Sega, which was an amazing experience. But as I was doing that, again, I felt like I wasn't making the projects I wanted to make. I was making the projects that Sega wanted to make. So I decided, after I had worked in Hollywood for a year as a TV development exec, I worked at Sega for another year as a game designer. And then I decided I'm going to leave Japan, go back home, which is Silicon Valley, and start my own game company. And that was the leap. So from the day I decided not to pursue engineering, not to take my father's advice, then I was the captain of my own ship. And I knew I wanted to do something that combined creativity and whatever else was out there, like whatever else was out there. And so I just kept pivoting. I did all these different things along the way. When I started my own company in Silicon Valley, the first company I started, it was a game company because I thought I can do this. I can't make movies. Movies are too expensive. It's just, you can't even get them distributed. But a game, I could make that. And I did go to engineering school, so I could code this. And I just made the entire game myself, like really on no money whatsoever. But that first game is called Gazillionaire. And it was all about entrepreneurship, like how to become a gazillionaire, an entrepreneur. And I uploaded that game to the early internet when they didn't really even have websites. They had BBSs, bulletin boards. I put it on there. And the largest PC gaming company in the world at the time was Spectrum Microprose. They were the big one, Spectrum Holobyte Microprose. Now their QA team, their testers, actually downloaded that game, started playing it, got hooked to it, and the president of the company called me up and said, we want to publish this right away. So my first game literally became a big hit. It went out everywhere. Gazillionaire was like super popular. It was entertainment product, but then it found a second life in schools and universities. And my company, LavaMind, made a series of these games like Gazillionaire, Zapitalism, Profitania. They all did really well. And then after that, I was like, wow, the internet is coming. Like this new thing, is taking over. I need to do this online. So I partnered with some of my friends. One was from film school, and another guy, he was an engineer. He had just done a big project for Microsoft. He had this whole back end that he had built for massively multiplayer gaming. And that was my second startup. So we all dove in there together, launched a company called Spider Dance, and our vision was to do interactive entertainment, interactive TV shows, like shows on the web that were fully synchronized to shows on TV. That was our vision. But how do you get there, in a startup? I didn't know. Today I run Founder Space. Today I write books, surviving a startup, all about this stuff. But at that time, I didn't know anything. I didn't know the first thing about, I didn't know any venture capitalists. I didn't, know how to do deals. I didn't know anybody at the TV companies. I had, in Hollywood, I was sort of in this middle role, but I didn't really meet the right people that I needed to meet to do this. I was only doing it a year. So what we did is we found out MTV wanted to do a project like this. They wanted to create the first big interactive TV show that was both on air and online, and they had a budget. So we started calling them, literally leaving messages on their voicemail. You don't take no for an answer. You're just calling. You know what? They never called back. No calls, nothing. Yes. But my friend, she got invited to speak at CES. And she was invited because of her previous company. She was working for this RGA, this big company that was doing all these projects. But now that she is with our startup, she decided to go and represent us. So she was on this panel, and she just starts talking about what we're doing. She's like, Spider Dance, that's our company. We are building a platform, which we hadn't fully built yet, to synchronize interactive content on the web to TV broadcasts. And she starts talking. After her talk, somebody comes running up from this audience, this guy, and he pushes his way through, he comes up to her, and he looks at her and he says, you have exactly what we've been looking for. I am the vice president of MTV. She looks at him and goes, I've been leaving messages on your voicemail. So literally within 2 months, we had a deal done with MTV. We were in production on this cutting edge show that was going to go out nationwide across the whole nation. And we had negotiated an incredible deal. Because they needed us, we were the only ones who even said we could do this, even though we hadn't been able, we had no experience doing this. They had agreed to put our company on air. They were doing ads, literally massively bombarding MTV at the time with ads for their new show, Web Riot. It's gonna go live. I'm at Zappa. Frank Zappa's son was the host. It was a music trivia game, and you could play along in real time, frame accurate on your PC. The only problem we had was that we hadn't built the technology. Like, we had this massively multiplayer game server that we had, but we hadn't built the part to synchronize to television, which we didn't know how hard it was. But of course we said we could do it, because like, if you don't like, one of the things I believe in doing something, anything great, and anything that you have to push yourself beyond your limits, you have to take a risk. So we were like committing to this, even though we probably shouldn't. If we were conservative, we would have never committed to that. It's being a little reckless. I mean, we knew we hadn't built it. We knew we might not be able to do it, but we believed we could. And we knew that if we're going to do this company, we have to do that. Like, we have to build this. And this was our opportunity, and we weren't going to let it slip away. And we're this unknown little company. In those days, also, working with a startup wasn't like today. Today, working with a startup, people will do that, like big corporations. But in those days, big corporations didn't do this. And they were actually nervous. Like, they knew we were a startup. They knew we hadn't built it, but we were their only choice, and they wanted to do this. So there was a deadline. Literally, from the time we really got started, it was 6 months away. And we had to build out not just the piece that synchronizes a television, which we had to figure out, but the entire platform. Like, we had literally a software that ran for a few people. Like, it wasn't a scalable system. There was no AWS. You had to get a co-location facility, a T1 line. You had to put in the servers and the racks. It was a lot of work. And then on top of that, we had to design the whole application. What is an interactive TV show? How will people interact? How can you it had to be frame accurate, because we were taking people playing online in real time and feeding their scores back into the TV broadcast so they could win prizes as the TV show was live, when it was live on air. So that was a whole thing we needed to figure out. Well, we were working like crazy with a really small team, because, they gave us $350,000, not a huge amount of money. So we had, 3 engineers and 3 more of us, like, doing all of this work, this massive amount of work. And we just kept going. And at the same time, I knew we needed more money, because $350K, like, that would get us to launch date, but really we'd have no money by then. So I was going out and trying to raise venture capital for the first time. There were no startup incubators. It wasn't like today in Silicon Valley, where you can walk in and there's all these networking meetings. It was an old boys club. Like, you were either in with these VCs or you weren't. And I wasn't. I didn't know who they were. So what do? I just started knocking on doors, like, trying to get through to people. And it was really hard, like, to get good meetings. I finally managed to get through to some big people in Hollywood, because we're doing the show with MTV. And it was literally like the former head of NBC Universal. He was, the head of the company. There was Michael Milken, the junk bond king. There was all these, famous people who were like investors in this in the LPs in this company, or, the partners. So we went in and pitched them, and they were like, "We love it. This is right in our power alley. We're going to give you the $5 million you need to take this big." So we negotiated a whole deal with them, paid $60,000 in legal fees, got the contract, handed it to them, and said, "Okay, let's sign it." And they said, "Well, we don't know that your product actually works. It hasn't launched yet. We want to wait until it launches." We're like, "Oh, you're going to wait? Like, don't put us under this extra pressure." But they wouldn't sign. They wouldn't give us the money. They just were waiting. Getting no's is hard. And it's especially hard when you meet somebody and they're all enthusiastic and they're excited, and then they don't call you back. You don't get a response, and you pitch them like, "Why aren't they calling me back?" Or they do call you back and they ask for more stuff, but they never commit. And so that's what was going on. At the end of the day, I believed that we were doing something that was really pushing the limits, and we had no choice. We had committed to MTV. We had committed to doing this company. That commitment is what drove me. So it didn't matter if I felt badly, like if I got beaten up, if I got knocked flat on my back. It didn't matter. I had to get up again because I had made this commitment. And so that's what was driving me. And I had a duty to MTV. I had a duty to my co-founders. We were all in this together. We were a group like this. This was our battle we were fighting. And, you know, my part was hard, but so was the engineers. They had a monumental task. Everybody had a monumental task, like an enormous task. My friend was the lead designer and creative director, and she, like, nobody had designed anything like an interactive TV app like this. It was a first time. So all these things we had to figure out. It came to the launch day. And now this day, if you thought it was hard up to here, you haven't heard anything yet. So we get ready. We're going to launch this. The problem was we couldn't load test it. Like, there wasn't the software for testing massive amounts of users, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people streaming in from television and playing this. Today you can do it. They're scalable systems. We didn't have that. Like, we literally cobbled it together, you know, in this co-location facility that nobody had heard of. And we didn't know if, when you sent all these people from all around the country at once, because they all had to log in literally at the same time when the show started, within a few minutes, would it crash the servers? And MTV didn't know. And they just turned to us, and the senior vice president said, my job is on the line. You better not screw up. This better work. And we knew the venture funding was on the line. So we launched it. Everything's going great. It's on air. People are flooding in. We see the numbers shooting up, like incredible. And then all of a sudden, the servers go down. They go down. The next second, the phone rings. It is the senior vice president of MTV. And I can't repeat what he said, but there were a lot of expletives in that. It was like, what the is going on? Like, you. And I was like, hold on, let me talk to my engineers. We'll figure this out. So I finally get them off the phone, calling up my engineers. They're freaking out. It turned out we were under a denial of service attack. And this was the early days. They didn't have firewalls like we have today and all these services. They, you know, Cloudflare, those didn't exist. Some hacker out there saw the ads on MTV and thought, wouldn't it be cool to bring this down? Wouldn't that be amazing? And so they were bombarding our servers. Our engineers running around, you know, manually blocking IP addresses. Boom, 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 trying to stop this. 2 minutes later, we're back on air. Back on air. Everything is working again. Whoosh. The show goes. Like, it is a hit. Everything works. MTV is happy. We knocked it out of the park. So I go, you know, the next day to these investors. We're desperate for money. We've spent every penny we have. We have these huge servers running, all these servers running, extremely expensive in those days. We have my engineers who need to get paid. We go to them. Okay, let's sign the deal. Everything's done. All we have to do is sign. They turned to us because they knew the position we were in. And they said, we will sign the deal, but at half the valuation. We had an agreement for $5 million at a $15 million pre-money valuation. They wanted to cut it down to $7.5 million, which meant they would take a huge portion of the company. We looked at them, and I was so pissed off. I mean, honestly, do I want these people? Do I want to be in bed with them? Do I want them on my board of directors? I think not. You can't. They're vulture capitalists. They will stab a knife in your back. This is an early warning red flag sign. I should have known in retrospect. And these are the things I learn, I write about in my book, Surviving a Startup, because you have to survive these things to know them, is that when they said they were going to sign the deal and then they said, no, we're going to wait, I should have known that was a red flag. That these guys were going to play games with me. You know, they weren't up front. So we walked away. The problem was it was right before Christmas. Literally Christmas. Everybody goes away. All the venture capitalists go away. And then after Christmas is CES, and everybody goes to CES. And only after CES, like later in January, do people really get back to funding deals. So we had a long, cold winter ahead of us. Like, we were like a whole lot of money. We had walked away from this deal. We had to beg our employees, just keep with the company, keep the faith. Like, we're gonna pull through this. We go, and I didn't stop. I just kept going. Like, I kept knocking on doors. And I finally got through to this company at the time, which is called Macromedia. And Macromedia made Director, and then they made Flash. and they were just launching Flash, and they're now Adobe, right? They merged with Adobe and they became Adobe. So I got it through to the president. He said, what you're doing is really cool, but we're launching Flash. Can you use Flash on your front end? He had the money to fund us. He was the head of their venture capital too. And you know what I said? Absolutely, no problem. I didn't know. I didn't consult my engineers. I was just like, you want Flash? We'll make it work. Like, we're going to make it work with Flash if you give us the money. And he goes, well, I can't give you the money because we're a corporation. I need an established venture firm to lead the deal. I was like, oh, back to square one. But he said, I will introduce you to some VCs. And I said, okay. So we wait. And I wait until the VCs start to come back. And then, later in January, and it's going into February, and he takes me into the first VC, and he actually comes along for the meeting. Like, I didn't expect that, but he comes along for the meeting. And the reason is, I realize, is that he's going to watch whether I can close this deal or not. And if I can't close this deal, he's probably not going to introduce me to, if it's embarrassing, like if they shoot, our company down, then he's just not going to make any more introductions. So I know everything's on the line. Like, this meeting is it. Like, I don't have other meetings. I don't have other competitors. Like, nothing, and we're just totally out of money. The servers are going to shut down. So I go into this meeting and I pitch, and I learned, don't show weakness. Like, do not show weakness. These are vulture capitalists. Like, if they know you're weak, they'll squeeze you. Like, I had that happen. So I learned one lesson, don't show weakness. So I start pitching, like, everything's great. We got this huge deal with MTV and Viacom. We have other deals we could line up. We blah, 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 blah. At the end of my pitch, I stop, and the VC was stone-faced, like, the entire time. Like, no reaction. And he goes, excuse me, I have to go do something. And he gets up and leaves the room. And I'm like, what just happened? And I turn to the president of Macromedia Adobe, and we look at each other, and we don't know. A few minutes later, he comes back, and he sets a paper down on the table, and he goes, here's your term sheet. I'm not giving you $5 million. I want to give you $7 million. I was like, oh my God, on the first pitch, like, literally, that's every entrepreneur's wet dream. Like, you want a term sheet on the first pitch. Like, if you could only have that. Like, I dreamed I'd spent months and months and months talking to these VCs that didn't invest, meeting after meeting after meeting. And here I had nailed it. I was like, what did I do that was so great? Well, one, I showed strength, right? I was in the meeting. I was like, we're going to do this. Number two, I did something inadvertently that was very powerful, and I realized it right on the spot. I mentioned to that venture capitalist that that Macromedia was going to introduce us to other VCs. Other VCs. He saw the president was there, and so he knew in his mind, right, if I walked out the door, one of his competitors may jump in and fund me. So these VCs operate off of fear and greed, right? Like, you got to make them more afraid of losing the deal than they are of losing their money. That's what I learned. Like, make them afraid to lose the deal, and they will commit on the spot. So I had done that, and I took note of that. And they're like, you need to know this for the future. It's not enough to do a great pitch. You got to light a fire under them. The other thing I knew is that these deals take a while to close. Lawyers are slow, they're out, it's not their company, it's not the lawyer's company. They could take as long as they want. And the VCs can wait. Like, if they wait, a better deal may come in. Once they know they have you, all the pressure is off. So I was thinking on the fly, and I was like, no, I won't. We don't want $7 million. He was like, what? And I was like, we only asked for $5 million. And I go, but I'll tell you what. I will take $6 million, we'll compromise halfway. And trust me, I wanted $7 million. $7 million would have been wonderful. But I was like, we will take $6 million if you can close this deal in 2 weeks. Why 2 weeks? Because we are about to go under. Literally, we needed the money in our bank in 2 weeks. So I said, if you could close the deal in 2 weeks, we will do the deal. He looked at me and goes, done deal. Boom. We had it. The lawyers, because both sides had committed to 2 weeks, the lawyers were being pushed by both sides. We committed the deal, we got the money, and we were off to the races. And I learned so much in that first year of doing a venture funded startup. A lot of it was, you don't understand, but I was a really shy guy, like really shy. I was really shy, but also really driven. So I had to push myself, especially in a sales role, which I had never done, to overcome those internal obstacles and actually be the person I imagined I could be. I learned that if you put the effort in, it doesn't come overnight. Like you have to like put yourself out there and you have to keep doing, like, I was hammering away at those VCs for a year before I figured out what I had to say to them that actually get deals done. But you can rewire your brain. You can literally transform your personality. So I was so painfully shy that if you go back to high school and ask anybody about Steve Hoffman, they'll say, oh, he was the shy guy who never talked. Like, and here I was, like, in a position where I literally had to, put it all out there. And they don't want to fund a shy guy who doesn't speak. Like, you have to be able to articulate what you're doing. You have to be able to move people and get them. And I didn't know the first thing about sales. And the willingness to learn, the willingness to take chances. I learned so much about like how you get people motivated to make a commitment, like on your behalf, that you really want without begging them or showing weakness. Like, those things don't work in the real world. People want to invest in people who are going to succeed. So you have to look like you're succeeding in order for them to even consider risking money on a crazy startup idea. So I will tell you, I have rules when presenting myself. And they're pretty strict rules that I follow. And I think it really works well. So the first thing I do is that when I'm presenting, I never lie. Like, I don't lie. Like, if they ask me a question, I will tell them. If he said, if that venture capitalist had said, are you totally out of money? I would have answered, yes, we're running out of money. But we're going to keep going, I would have said, no matter what. But I would have told him the truth. He didn't ask, so of course I'm going to be smart and I'm not going to focus on the fact that we're running out of money. The other thing, so everything you do, you don't have to lie. You should always tell the truth, because honestly, it's not good for your own integrity. You can't have strength if you are being, sleazy. And honesty, you have to be honest. And also, people find out. There's a network. People find out things. So if you say, oh, I have 10 VCs or I have another VC who's ready to commit, a lot of them will turn to you and say, okay, go with that. Let me talk to them. They will call you on those things. It's stupid to do that. You don't need to do that. The point is, you don't need to do that. You can win being totally honest. The other thing I learned is that when you engage with anybody in any sort of relationship, really take time to understand their perspective. Like, how do they perceive you? Because it doesn't matter how you perceive yourself. Like, some people think they're the greatest person in the world, whatever, that's fine. But it's really what matters is how they perceive you. And if you want to be perceived correctly, you need to get in their head. So you need to spend time. So after every time I pitched, literally, and this is a sales pitch, this is how I became better. I work hard. Like, I work really hard. After every time I would pitch anybody, I would run that whole pitch over in my head. And I would notice everything I did where their eyes lit up, where they were like leaning forward. And everything I was saying where it didn't resonate. It just bounced off them, or they were on their phone doing something. The point is, I took away from this and I was constantly working to improve myself. So whether it was pitching for sales, whether it was public speaking, and I became a pretty decent public speaker, but literally my first public speaking, you would have laughed. I was so nervous, I was shaking. I couldn't even get the words out of my mouth. It was awful. But you just persist at doing these things. And in my past, I learned early on that these changes could be made. So I was one of those kids, I was super shy, and in middle school, junior high school, I was like the shy kid, and I was bullied by people. Like, people would, these bullies would, they sense it. They sense that you have anxiety, you're fearful, and they prey upon you, right? So at the end of, literally, like in the last week of junior high school, one of the kids who was bullying me I decided I just had enough. And I went up to him. He came up to my locker and he was kind of doing stuff. I slammed my locker shut, looked that bully in the eye and said, I will meet you by the tracks and I'll beat the blank out of you. I showed up at the tracks. He didn't. That transformed my life. It's like a classic story, but it literally works. The next year when I went into high school, I was a skinny kid, like the last person you would expect to join the wrestling team. But I decided I'm going to be a warrior. Like nobody ever again is going to bully me. It's just like this decision. I made 2 decisions entering high school. One, I was a mediocre student and a kind of a wimp, right? Entering high school, I decided I'm going to join 3 sports a year, and one of them is going to be wrestling. My mom was like, you in wrestling? You're going to get murdered. And I did get murdered, but I stuck with it 3 years, made the varsity team. Never was great, but stuck with it. And I also decided at the same time I'd do 3 sports, I would get all A's. And literally, I put my mind to it. I ended up graduating valedictorian in my class from this mediocre student, like B- student before. All of a sudden, you can transform who you are. And today, like all that shyness is gone. Like I am not that same person. Like I can get up in front of an audience of thousands of people, which I do quite often, don't have it. So I look at other people out there who are striving to do their best, to like achieve those things they can do. Usually it's you telling yourself you can't do them because you telling yourself how you are. You just need to reimagine who you can be. Like you could be that warrior, you could be that lover, you could be the king, right? You could be all those things, but for that to happen, you have to visualize it. You have to believe it. And then it won't happen overnight. Like you are still going to be the same person, but you are at least incrementally, if you work at it every day, you can start to change. And you have to make it fun process. You can't see it as a burden. You have to see it as a challenge. And every time you have a setback, you're like, I'll just do better next time. Like I'm going to double down on this. Like I got crushed, I did many companies. I work with many entrepreneurs. I've had so many times I was just knocked out, like somebody just flattened me. Even today, I'm relatively successful. Things come at you that you just can't control and don't expect. So when I'm coaching other entrepreneurs, I'm telling them this, like you can do it, but you have to be prepared to make fundamental changes in your life. You can't, if you're at whatever level you're at, you could be at a much higher level. Like all of us, you're never done. I'm not done, right? I'm learning from your show. I'm learning from the people around me. I'm always studying, trying to get better. And you have to be prepared for the failures. What you have to understand, and I learned this in my life. So, I had a big success with my first company. The second company, you see, I put everything into it, like everything into it. But what a lot of people don't know is that company ended up failing. Like you're like, how could it fail? Like you had been through so much, to give birth to this company. How could it fail? And I will tell you how. We were riding high. This was the .com boom, the bubble. And we were riding high. We actually became like the #1 interactive TV platform in the world. We had NBC, like Weakest Link. We had Game Show Network. We had History Channel. We had, you name it, Warner Brothers. They were all on our platform. And we were like, a public company came to us, and they said, we want to buy you. We want to buy you. And because we had cut a really good deal for our financing, the founders owned the majority of the shares. So we would have walked away with a lot of money. There wasn't much dilution. But our investors said, look, we've done this before. You guys are on fire. Don't sell. We're going to ride this all the way. And at the time, we didn't know. Half of us wanted to, half of myself wanted to sell. The other half wanted to believe that we could, grow this even bigger. So we listened to our investors. We waited. What we didn't realize in our crystal ball was that 6 months later, the bubble would burst. Literally everything. The .com bubble burst. All the money dried up. We could have been fine. But what happened was every single one of our customers, literally the first thing they cut when their ad revenue went away because the bubble was bursting, the first thing they cut was the interactive. Their interactive wasn't making money. It was an experimental project. So they're like, NBC, which we were working with, they had 250 people at the time in their interactive group. A few weeks later, they had 3 people. 3. people. Like, I went into the vice president of NBC in charge of interactive, and he was like, you can keep doing this, but you have to sell the ads. We're no longer selling the ads. You have to do. I was like, we don't even, you weren't even able to sell the ads. They were literally bundling the interactive ads with their television ads as kind of a bonus. Like, how are we going to run these servers? We selling the ads. That happened across the board. Everybody stopped paying. Our revenue went from like going, hockey stick down to like zero. Like, it was insane. That was the hardest time I had ever had in my life. It was literally like, I thought it was hard before. Like, I'd been through so much. I'd given birth to this baby. This baby was so popular. We were everywhere. We had deals with all the major TV networks. And now I was being told, nobody was going to pay us. And no venture capital company, they were all pulling back. They were retracting. They were only investing in their own companies if they had potential, like if they had revenue. We suddenly had no revenue. We were looking really bad. So laying off everybody, really brutal, like really makes you question yourself. Then, it was our baby. We saw it crumbling around us, literally. The barbarians were storming the gates. Like, we couldn't keep them out. Every day, it got worse and worse and worse. The company we could have kept that company going, except we had borrowed millions of dollars on top of our venture funding from a venture bank, like these banks that give you a great deal, but you owe that money. And we couldn't make the debt payments. We couldn't make our lease payments. We had rented out this huge space. We couldn't make our co-location payments. We couldn't make any payments. Like, we were racking up all huge amounts of money, and no investor wanted to step into this company that was bleeding cash during a dot-com bubble crash. The bank that had loaned us the money, the venture bank, they actually were in bankruptcy themselves because all their companies were coming down at the same time. They had hired an ex-Marine to come in there and extract the money from these companies. So an ex-Marine was literally on the phone to me saying, you're gonna pay us, right? You're gonna pay us. I was like, we aren't gonna pay you because we have nothing but debt right now. Like, nothing but debt. And they were our primary debt, we owed them millions, so they came first. I saw a path forward, and it wasn't the path I wanted to take. Like, I wanted to keep that company alive so much, but it was the best path for everybody involved. And that path was not to go through bankruptcy, which is brutal. I said, look, if you can forgive our debt, we will give you all of our IP, like our baby, like literally millions of dollars, because we couldn't use that IP. They couldn't use it, but they had to get something, right? They had to get something. He had to check a box. So we gave them our IP and we just shut our doors, walked away. That was the beginning of a deep depression I went into. So all the optimism I have shown you, like to date, like all the can do, I was suddenly crushed. Like, it went away. Like, I couldn't get out of bed for a month. I was like, my whole psychology was, I'm not fit to be a CEO. I should never have gotten into this. I could never go through this again. It is just too much. I can't handle this. But lying there in bed, at a certain point, I was like, you keep telling yourself these things, so they are true. Is that the life you want to live? Do you want to go on the rest of your life? You're still in your 20s, like, you're young. Do you want to go on the rest of your life with this script playing in your head about how you failed and how you're a failure and how you could never, and you just need to go get a corporate job or something like that and be happy with whatever? And I go, no, that's not who I am. That's not the image I painted of the warrior king that I wanted to become. And I go, if I will become, I will never reach that goal if I keep telling myself this. So I literally pulled myself up and started to rewrite the script in my head, reprogram myself from, scratch to say, this was a failure. I was not going to deny it. Like, you had failed. Yes, it would have been great if you had sold to that public company right before the dot-com bubble burst, but you didn't have a crystal ball. We all make mistakes. And if you're going to just focus on your mistakes, you're never going to get anywhere. Like, you have to learn from those. You have to learn what you should do, what decisions you should have made. There are plenty of things I would have done differently, but then you just got to move on. You got to move forward. One of my fundamental philosophies is that we all write our own stories, and we all get the great gift of being able to live them out. Now, those stories may not be what we expect. any great story, your hero is going to be crushed at some point. Like if it's a great story, the drama's there, right? That hero has to have a low point. And this is what I learned in writing school. And if you look at your life as this amazing epic story, warrior, king, lover, right? Where you want to achieve these amazing things, but you're going to have to suffer to do it. Then suffering becomes an essential part of that story. In fact, you don't want to get rid of it. You want to. So I look at this experience now as an amazing gift, like an amazing experience. Yeah, it was brutal, but I couldn't be the coach I am today to all these entrepreneurs, right, around the world that I work with. If I hadn't experienced that, I couldn't have written the books I write. If I hadn't experienced that, I would be a different person. So this is who I am. And I think for everybody out there, if you change your mindset to I'm on this amazing journey and there are going to be times when I am just devastated on this journey, but I'm going to keep going and see where it leads me, you will be able to appreciate what life gives you. The best way to grow as a human being and have the right perspective on life is to set goals for yourself. Set big goals for yourself. Goals that are way out of reach, some that you may never reach. But in order to maintain your optimism and your energy, appreciate every little step along the way. Like when you have a small victory, just a small thing goes right, sit back, recognize it, feel good. Wow, I'm better than I was before. I did something that I had never done before. Allow yourself that moment. That will make the journey so much better. I hope you enjoyed the talk. If you liked it, you can come to founderspace.com. You can check out our latest events, contact us, and see my latest books, Make Elephants Fly, Surviving a Startup, and The 5 Forces. You can also find me on all the major social networks. Just search for Founderspace.